Hi everyone. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Eva. I'm the violist in the Callisto Quartet. So nice to see all of you. How is everything going? You can just give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Hopefully it's all thumbs up for everyone. So tell me a little bit about what these interpretation sessions have been like so far. Like, what have you learned? What have you? I would love to hear if there was something that you learned that you didn't know that surprised you or that you thought was really interesting. Anyone can unmute and speak up at any time, or I'll call on someone. Okay, Anna, what's something that you learned in one of the sessions that you thought was interesting?
Um, well, we talked a lot about like the similarities and differences of different movements. So, um, I think I learned what a lot of movements sounded like that I hadn't heard yet because they were new and I've never played them before. Other
Awesome.
than
Yeah. So as we're kind of seeing through these three pieces, a lot of these string quartet works, especially the ones kind of in the classical era, are structured pretty similarly. So how many of you can you guys raise your hands like if you have done Credo before? So good, like awesome about half you guys. And then for everybody, I know that those of you who have done Credo before have played in quartets before, but who has played in string quartets before? Okay, awesome. Almost everybody. That's great. So are these things? Sometimes these are things that we notice, and sometimes they're things that we don't notice until they're pointed out to us. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to see how these works are structured. So you've talked about the kind of opening movements and slow movements, and today we're going to talk about the minuet and scherzo movements. So that's typically like the slow movement and scherzo slash minuet movement are usually the middle movements. Sometimes it's second or third. And as you can see in these pieces, what is it? It's second movement in the Mozart and third movement. These minuets are like the third movement in the Beethoven and the Haydn. So, what do you guys know about minuet movements or scherzo movements? Anything at all? Impressions, things you know from having played them. Again, you guys might as well speak up or I'm going to start calling on people.
They're usually pretty fast.
Yeah, sometimes they're fast. What do they what is a minuet?
A dance.
Yeah, it's a dance. And anyone know what meter it's in? Yeah, so I'm seeing
It's in 3/4.
yeah. So they're almost always are I think always in three if they're a minuet. Um, what about scherzo? Does anyone know what the word scherzo means? Like literal translation? So sometimes we often see, especially in the Haydns and Mozarts, we see minuets. And then Beethoven is kind of known for giving us scherzos instead of minuets. So it's a very similar structure, also in three, also very dance-like. Um, but the word scherzo, literally translated, means joke. So there is a lot of humor in these. As we can see, and as I'm sure you guys have been talking about in your lessons and your other seminars, Beethoven really takes the structure of the string quartet and takes it to the extremes. So in our scherzos, there's a lot of drama. The tempo might be a lot faster. We see that a lot. And as we'll see in this third movement of 18/6, even though this is an early work by Beethoven, he really finds a lot of interesting things to do with the rhythmic structure, with the tempo, just really create something new, interesting, exciting, and kind of humorous with this form. So I thought that we could spend some time listening to these pieces. I'm sure I trust you guys have done your due diligence and have listened to these movements, but I'd like to just make sure we're all on the same page and listen to a little bit of them. But before we listen to the pieces that we're talking about today, I'd love to just listen to an earlier work by Haydn. So I'm going to play for you guys the minuet movement of Haydn Opus 20, number 1. Has anyone heard or played any of the Haydn Opus 20 string quartets? Has anyone else talked about them in their seminars? Okay, so they're really wonderful pieces. It's a set of 6. And they weren't the earliest quartets that Haydn wrote, but they were they are the earliest string quartets in the repertoire that we still play today, that are still kind of part of the canon. So that's pretty cool. So these were written in 1772, and they were the first set of quartets that really kind of defined Haydn as the father of the string quartet. So he had written for this instrumentation before, and other composers had written for this instrumentation before, but these quartets really solidified what this genre was going to be. So in these works, as compared to his earlier string quartets, like I'm pretty sure his Opus 1 had a, like Opus 1 number 3, I'm pretty sure is his earliest string quartet. And if you listen to it, I don't know it, people don't perform it. It's very, very simple, not terribly interesting. And these Haydn Opus 20 quartets, he starts to give more melodic material to more voices. There's more interesting counterpoint. They're longer. The phrases are not always exactly symmetrical, so it's just compositionally more interesting. And this was kind of the start of Haydn's journey of really turning this genre of the string quartet into something really expressive, really interesting, really amazing. And that was, he really carried us forward into the string quartet becoming what it is today. And then Mozart, Beethoven, Brahms, Schubert, Debussy, Ravel, whoever else you want to name these, and especially the German composers that came after Haydn, really kind of were able to do what they did because of what he started. So it's really interesting to go back and listen to these Opus 20 quartets because, of course, this was 250 years ago, almost 249 years ago exactly, I believe, that these were written. And so because of the benefit of time, we can listen back to these works and think that they sound super simple and kind of boring, and maybe aren't as exciting as some of Haydn's later works or, Beethoven or other composers. But at the time, he was really being incredibly inventive. And so it's really cool to listen to his kind of journey as a composer and see what he was able to create. So I'm going to, just for the interest's sake, to see how these movements develop because they stay pretty similar. The structure of a minuet slash scherzo movement stays pretty similar throughout this entire period. But we can see the ways in which it gets more complicated. So I'm going to screen share and show you the score, and we'll listen to the minuet movement of Haydn Opus 20 number 1. So let me know if the screen share is working, and I don't know if there's something specific I need to do to make the audio work, so also let me know if that's working. Let's see. And I do need to find it as well. That's strange. Oh, excuse me, wrong movement. Can you guys hear it? Give me a thumbs up if it's working. Great. Okay. So, thoughts on this piece? As compared to, hopefully you've all listened to the third movement of Sunrise. We'll listen to that as well. But just any reactions to this Haydn Opus 20?
Well, I noticed like when I was listening to it, I was trying to it was easy to find like where the beats are. Like you can tell that it's in three, like
Mm-hmm.
the way that the notes are set up. So that's like one thing I kind of noticed.
Yeah. Yeah, the meter's really clear. Let's go ahead and listen to the. So that again was written in 1772, and our Haydn Sunrise, which is Opus 76, number 4, was written between 1797 and 1798. So really, in the grand scheme of things, not very long after he wrote the Opus 20s. So he was really able to do a lot with this genre in a short amount of time. So let me share my screen again. We'll get started on the score. Let's see. Does anyone have any favorite recordings of this? Which one should we listen to? I'm not totally sure what's all on here. Oh, JK, we're gonna listen to this one. This one's gonna be really good. So I love the Alban Quartet, especially for this type of repertoire, for kind of this Germanic and classical repertoire. They do a really beautiful job. So let's listen to this. Sorry. Okay, so What are some similarities and or differences that you guys notice between these two pieces by Haydn, these two minuet movements? Well, first of all, let's establish, this might be an easy question for you guys, but what's the form of these movements? So they all have the same form. And there's a little hint here. We have this marking down here. Anybody? So they're all in ABA form, right? So we have this minuet section. Obviously, it's marked minuetto. It has kind of a similar material throughout. Then we get to a double bar here. This one has a first ending and a second ending. They don't all, as the previous one didn't. And then we literally have a different section marked trio. We call that the trio section. So play through the minuet with all the repeats, play through the trio with the repeats if there are repeats, and then, as this says down here, minuetto DC. So da capo, go back to the beginning of the minuet and play that through again without repeats. So again, that's probably something pretty simple for most of you guys, but kind of bears repeating. So what are some similarities or differences that you notice between those two pieces? I mean, you can really tell that one is a lot earlier and one Haydn, and the other one Haydn is a much more mature composer, right? Like, even if you can't pin your finger on why, it's more interesting, it's longer, it's kind of more exciting, it's more something that we would be, could see leading into Beethoven, into later composers. Agreed? So what are some of the elements that make that true?
Maybe more accidentals?
Yeah, there's definitely more harmonically interesting stuff in there, right? Yeah, there's more chromaticism. I'm gonna actually just leave it on the score so we can see that. Would anybody like me to send the links in the chat so you guys can look at the scores on your own, or is this good? Let me know if you want anything, and I'll send it. So which one seems easier? So for comparison, here's the Opus 20.
In the chat.
Sorry, say that again?
Sorry, could you please send the links in the chat?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let me stop screen sharing so it'll be easier. So that's Opus 20. This is Opus 76. And then here's the other ones we'll be looking at. Here's the Mozart. And the Beethoven. And I'll screen share also just so everybody can see in case you're on an iPad or something. So especially if you are not the first violin here in this Opus 20, it's pretty straightforward, right? Okay, we have like some dotted figures. Basically, no one else gets the melody in this entire piece. And this is, I mean, keep in mind, this is already a departure from what came before. These other parts, other than the first violin part, are already much more interesting than they were in previous works for this instrumentation. And then we skip ahead a few years to this Opus 76, and we're really alternating the melody. So the first violin has it here, and then the middle voices are trading it off with the first violin. Cello gets it here. This goes at quite a clip, right? Da 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 bum ba da da da. So a lot of this material is not that easy. You get some of this passage work in the lower voices and the middle voices. So we can already see that this is more virtuosic, a little more challenging. We can see more kind of drama in the dynamics. It's a little longer. I don't know if any violists noticed how interesting our part is in the trio section of the Opus 20. So for the entire first half of the trio, we have nothing. And then for the entire second half of the trio, we have nothing except for these three notes right here. So you can see the difference between that And, this trio section where everybody's equally important. We have this kind of, drone situation happening in the lower voices, but there's passage work in all the instruments. So just kind of interesting to see those things. And I'm going to go ahead and the Mozart is beautiful. I trust you've all listened to it, but we don't have tons of time. So I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead to Beethoven. And already looking at this, you can tell, just looking at the score, you can tell that it's a lot more difficult, right? So here we have this scherzo marking like we talked about. So that means joke. So there's a lot of humor and excitement in this piece. And the scherzos also tend to be quite a bit faster than the minuets. Have any violinists played this piece? Take a look at this trio. Tempo is like that's one, like downbeats. So this is a really difficult piece. So let's give it a listen. Let's see. Is Dover out yet? Okay, reactions to that piece. That's really different, right? And so for context, the Haydn Opus 76, The Sunrise, was written between 1797 and 1798, and this was written between 1798 and 1800. So these pieces are like really like written practically at the exact same time. So it's pretty amazing what Beethoven does, right? Reactions, thoughts, how is this? So what's different about this? So is it more exciting or less exciting in your guys' opinion?
More exciting.
Yeah, I think it's more exciting. It sounds a lot harder, right? And it is a lot harder. it's so what makes it more exciting or more, I don't want to say more interesting because I don't think the Haydn is uninteresting, but how does Beethoven take what he inherited from Haydn and do new things with it? Like, what ways is he playing tricks on us, or where does that humor element come in? I can also put the score back.
There's different rhythms, I think. He makes them more syncopated, so it sounds like all the notes are kind of, yeah, I'm not going to say tripping over each other, but it kind of sounds like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you can see here, he's really obscuring where the downbeats are. So as somebody pointed out in one of the earlier pieces that we listened to, I think in the Opus 20, it was really, really clear where all the beats were. Oh my gosh, this thing's in the way. Ugh. So as you can see here, like, we have tons of quarter notes and slurs showing us, da da dum ba da dum. Like, the measures are really, really clear. And then here in this Opus 76, they get a little less clear. As we can see, these da 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 dum are kind of, you can still tell where the downbeat is, but we're playing around a little bit with that, these ties over the bar lines and stuff like that. And then when we move into Beethoven, he is almost completely obscuring the meter. So as we talked about, like, this 3/4, this like triple meter thing is like basically the definition of what these dance movements are. And here we have Beethoven giving us that, but really kind of being really playful with it. So we have, not only are all the bar lines tied over in the first and second violin parts, we also have these sforzandos on the and of 3. Dun 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 dun. So you're kind of like, it starts off, and like even in the lower voices, instead of having like a quarter note pickup, which we might be used to, we have a 3/8 note pickup. So it's almost like kind of confusing, like, are we in 6/8? Are we in 3/4? Where's the downbeat? And it's so fast that you can, like, it's hard to get your bearings. And that only continues, he only continues to play with that as the piece goes on. Where was I wanting to point out? So here we have, if you remember when we get to like this part, da 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 da. Terrible singing, but you kind of see how this is outlined. So finally we get here, and then we have straight eighth notes, and they kind of follow the contour of the line. It's like, oh, okay, we're in 3/4. I get it. And then as soon as he does that, we go back into this question mark, like, are we in 2? Are we in 6/8? Dum ba ba. It sort of sounds like this, right? Da 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 da. When really the meter is, I don't even know if I can do it. Da 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 da. Does that make sense? I'm not explaining this very well, but you can see it in the score. I wish we had bar numbers here, but everyone can see what I'm talking about. It sounds like we're in 6/8. It sounds like we're in 2, and then we have this whole kind of syncopated section where it's da 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 da, and it's bouncing back and forth between the instruments, and we have no idea what meter we're in. And then even popping out of that, coming back into this obscured downbeat kind of opening material, it's really hard to tell what the meter is, and he's doing that on purpose. So having kind of talked about that, let's just listen to it one more time, just the beginning of it. So it's kind of interesting, right? And really, I mean, 6/8 and 3/4 are equivalent in some ways because they all have the same number of eighth notes in the bar, but they give a really different feeling. And it's really amazing how he bounces back and forth between those two things. So what other things that are really kind of represent Beethoven's style can we see in this? So what do you think of when you think of Beethoven? Anybody? And I think a lot of those things you can see here. So what pieces by Beethoven do you guys like? If you think of Beethoven, are you thinking, I mean, Beethoven 5, that's common, right? Beethoven 9, the symphonies. What defines Beethoven in those pieces? Or in the pieces that you've played? Anybody?
He has like famous like motives.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's famous for something that we might call motivic saturation or motivic development. So taking like a really small chunk. A really famous example is in the Fifth Symphony. Ba 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 ba, ba 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 ba. So just like three short notes and a long note, and the whole symphony is built off of that. And you can see that in all of his works. And interestingly, that's something that he inherited from Haydn. So Haydn did this as well, and we can see this in, like, as I'm sure you've all been working through Sunrise, you've seen the same motives come back again and again and again. So that's something that Haydn did, and something that Beethoven took to even more of an extreme, taking even smaller chunks and developing them even more obsessively. So as you can see, this whole scherzo is built off of this same material. The whole trio section, you can see it's just the same thing over and over and over again. And yet somehow it's still interesting to us. It's still exciting. So that's something amazing about Beethoven. So something else that I think of when I think of Beethoven is dramatic dynamic changes, right? And we can see that here. Alternating like every measure, piano and forte. And that's a really big difference in this classical era. That's basically opposite, like piano and forte. Sforzandos we think of a lot when we think of Beethoven. Again, he's giving us sforzandos every bar in the wrong place. So that's really interesting. These are tools he uses. And if you think back to this like Opus 20 Haydn, or even the Opus 76 Haydn, he's giving us some of that. Like there are, there's, differences in dynamic, and we can see sforzandos and things like that. But none of them are really as exaggerated in the drama as Beethoven. So we can already see how Beethoven is taking us in new directions with this type of form. Does anyone have questions so far? Observations? Do you have a favorite piece out of the ones that we've been talking about? There's no right answer. They're all amazing. No? Okay. Well, let's dive into sort of talking about what are the interpretive challenges of working on these movements. So, who has played one of these, not these specific movements, but any sort of minuet or scherzo movement? And can you tell us like what are the challenges? Anybody?
I haven't played that many scherzos, but the ones I have, it's kind of hard to like to still be expressive when you start getting the tempo up, since they go so fast.
Yeah, definitely. Especially in pieces like this where it's really fast. It's a little bit easier in some of the earlier ones, like in the Opus 20, it's like pretty moderate tempo, so it can be easier. So maintaining here, I'm gonna unshare the screen for a second. Maintaining a dance-like feeling, I think, can be a big challenge, and both a challenge and something that's very, very important. So these are dance movements. It's really kind of essential to the form that always comes through, and that's clear. So balancing, this is something I think about a lot in classical repertoire in general, is balancing, that refined quality that we want, the elegance, the beauty, the sophistication of the sound that we're looking for, but still having it be exciting. Has anyone else talked about that in their sessions, or like what are some thoughts on that? You guys are so quiet. Okay, so I think like we can look into the music to get a lot of this information. Okay, so let me back up a little bit. So some questions that I think about when I'm thinking about these dance movements, these minuets and scherzos. like, so it's a dance, like what kind of dance? So they're all in triple meter, but if we're thinking of dances in this era, we can think of like courtly dances that are really refined and kind of, you're picturing like the powdered wigs, and I'm sure you guys have like seen like movies where they have these courtly dances, right? And then there's also like, peasants also dance, and you can imagine sort of like the barn dances that were going on, not in the court, but kind of like out where the peasants are living. And so there can be both of those things can be present in this music. So those more kind of like rustic types of dances are also possible. Deciding on tempo can be sort of challenging, right? And that can be for any movement, but is present here too. Deciding. So do you think? Give me feedback. Like, would you think that the trio sections should be the same tempo as the minuets? Always the same, always different, case by case basis? What do you guys think? Case by case basis is always a safe answer. So that would be my answer for this. And what else was I going to say? There was one more thing I was going to say. Anyway, for all of these elements, we can sort of look to the music to give us some answers. So I'm going to play the trio section of the Haydn Opus 76, number 4, The Sunrise, and then, let's see, the trio section, if I can find them in the recording, of the Mozart back-to-back, and tell me what you think the difference in character is. Okay, share screen. Sorry, this is so complicated. Here's the Mozart. Okay. Okay, so that's kind of an idea. So, which one do they sound like they have a different character? You think? So give me some words to describe each of them. Ethan. Sorry, can you get a little closer to your microphone and say that again? Yeah, so a little more melodic in the Mozart. Good. Who hasn't talked yet? Selena.
I feel like the Mozart one may be a little bit kind of lively.
Yeah, it is lively. Yep. I think that's like kind of an element that we see in a lot of these movements. They're all like lively and very kind of sparkling and buoyant. Jason, what about you? Can you give us something that's like different between those two trio sections?
I don't really know anything else to say.
Okay, that's okay. So, do you guys think, I sort of think that the Haydn is a little more kind of like rustic feeling and the Mozart is a little more refined. Is that agree, disagree? So, and we can see, so we can hear it. Honestly, I will say that when we play this Haydn, we play it a little bit differently than this recording. I feel like this recording is still a little more refined sounding than I would personally prefer. So we can hear in the like way that the music sounds, but we can also see in the score that we have kind of all these sforzandos and these long drones. They sound kind of bagpipey, don't they? Doesn't this sound kind of like bagpipey? And it's nice and heavy. Like you see, especially here in the second half, we have these offset sforzandos where the upper half of the quartet has it on the third beat and then the lower half of the quartet has it on the first beat. So that's like giving us two heavy beats right in a row. So you can sort of imagine, maybe this is like an uncouth kind of image, but you can sort of imagine people in heavy boots dancing along to this, right? Like it's a little more rustic, like it's a little heavier, it's kind of jolly and jovial, whereas this Mozart, like especially we can see like it's sempre piano. We have these delicate eighth notes with dots that are really soft in the middle voices, and this just delicate trilling and these like beautiful melodies in the first violin, right? So this sounds pretty operatic. I don't know if any of you guys listen to opera, but that's something that we think about every time we play anything by Mozart. He's a really big, important opera composer. He wrote a lot of operas. Somebody once told me that we always need to remember that Mozart thought of himself as an opera composer who just wrote other things on the side. So I play string quartet, so I think of him as a string quartet composer. But that operatic element is really present in a lot of his works, and this one definitely as well. But to me, like if we're trying to think of the difference between kind of like a refined, sophisticated courtly dance and sort of like a more rustic peasant dance, I think these two have that difference. Does that make sense to everyone? Are there any questions about that? Or how you'd be able to identify that? So again, you can sort of feel it when you play it, like how the music sounds. And you can also look for those elements in the score. So how about tempo between minuet and trio sections? Let me see, stop share. So I think that's another thing that we can just listen to the music. And I will also say that there are differing opinions on this. I have heard from some professional musicians who I respect that the tempo should always be the same. And if he doesn't mark a difference in tempo, then the tempo should be the same. And I've heard from other professional musicians who I respect that the tempo should, if the character is different, then the tempo should definitely be different. So this is your mileage may vary. And this is, where your own interpretive skills come in and where you are ultimately going to have to make your own decisions based on what you think. So my sort of perspective on this is that we can look at the affect. Does everyone know what I mean when I say affect? Kind of like the mood, the character. So we can look at the affect of the music and see what tempo it kind of wants to be in, if that makes sense. So let me see if I can find. So for an example, let's just listen to Mozart. And I think that this one works in the same tempo. Let's see where we're just listening to it. So if it works in the same tempo, so we have this sort of, legato singing material in the minuet, and then we have this kind of delicate trio section that we just listened to. If they both work in the same tempo, great. It makes sense to play them in the same tempo. And I think that is kind of standard. So you can see that this tempo works for the mood of both of those sections. So do you guys see how it's the same tempo, but we still are able to have a really different character in both of these sections? I think that's another important interpretive element that I forgot to kind of highlight earlier. So we have these pieces are in ABA form. So we have the minuet, scherzo, and then do the minuet again. And we always get a really different, like a really contrasting character between the minuet and the trio sections. And so bringing those things out is both really important and also really fun. So as you can see in the beginning of this Mozart, we have like a lot of long slurs, and we're in forte, so we have this kind of like rich, like warm, smooth sound. And then to contrast in this trio section, it's just like so like sprightly and lively and delicate and beautiful and really different. So I wonder if there is a trio section that we're talking about that it would be a different tempo. I don't really think that any of these need to be in a different tempo. But the same with these other ones. If you're deciding what tempo something should be in, just wanting to feel the swing of things, and like for instance, the Haydn, the Opus 76 is da 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 dum bum ba da 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 dum bum. Sort of, you almost end up feeling it in one. And then same for that trio. Dum bum bum ba dum ba da da dum ba da dum. And so yeah, that can happen with a lot of this music as well, where you're kind of the downbeats are really important, and that kind of triple meter swing is just in there. So you can see how this one will have a really different character from this Mozart that we were just talking about. Even you can see it. Oh my gosh, I keep going to the wrong thing. Yeah, you can even see from just looking at the score that these are going to be different. So this has, really long lines and is not super active rhythmically. And this has, a lot of short slurs, short notes, like with rests in between, really active rhythmically, kind of a little more rambunctious. So there can be really a vast array of characters encompassed in this same form. So that's something that I love about these movements. They can be so creative. It's really easy to think that they all sort of start to sound the same. It's just another minuet movement. But even these, which were all written in a really short time span. So Mozart was written in 1784, and Beethoven was the latest, which was written latest 1800. So all written in a short time span, but they're so different from each other. Another interpretive element, which is always a challenge in these types of pieces, is that they are very repetitive, right? So often, even just the composed material is really repetitive. Let's pick one. Which one's your guys' favorite for us to keep looking into in a little more detail? Okay, I'll just pick one. Let's look at Haydn, I guess. So as you can see, this is pretty repetitive. Like these, two measures are basically the same. Two measures the same. And then, even when we get to the repeat, it's a sequence. This same material over and over again. So even in the material that's written, it's pretty repetitive. And then we get all these repeats. Everything's repeated. So you play this twice, then you play all this twice, then you go to their trio, and then you come back and do it all again. So keeping yourselves and the audience interested through that, sometimes you have to come up with some interesting plans. So let's see. Between like these two, like let's say we're starting at the repeat, so I guess this is measure 9. Like we don't have any dynamics marked here. Again, I apologize for my terrible singing. So you could there's all sorts of possibilities here. Like when you play this whole section and come back for the repeat, do you want to do this forte or piano? Do you want to crescendo through this? Do you want to diminuendo through this? You want to do an echo? Do you want to be less than more? Like there's this whole sequence, and this could sound really good if you start loud and then do a big diminuendo, and then this fortissimo here is a surprise. That can be really exciting. It can also be exciting to start this a little less and then grow into it, so there's kind of a big buildup. So there's lots of options for these things, and that is both one of the great joys and the great struggles of these movements in our quartet, is kind of thinking of all the different possibilities. So that's kind of like, once we get everything fitting together, that's kind of like the first thing we do is think of all the possibilities and then decide which ones we like and where they're going to go. Because if you do it the exact same way every time, then you're missing out on a lot of kind of creative possibilities there. So I think what we often like to do is figure out the way that sounds the most natural and do that first, and then find something that is like maybe a little cheeky or surprising, and do that on the repeat. So there are a lot of dynamic possibilities for these types of things. And I would encourage you to listen to different recordings, and even better if you can find like live performances on YouTube and see kind of what people do and how they keep it interesting, and or if you find any performances or recordings where they don't do anything different and they keep it the same every time, see how that's maybe not quite as interesting, and think of what you might like to hear on a repeat or differently the other times. So that'll be something really fun for you guys next time you get to play in a quartet in person. And if you get to do any of these movements, to really get creative and come up with a unique way of doing it. As I'm sure you know, and maybe my colleagues have mentioned, like we have these markings, and also this isn't the best edition ever, I don't think. Really important to get text editions when you can, the ones that are most faithful to the the manuscript, because otherwise the editors put in dynamics that aren't really faithful to what the composer wrote. But so we have some markings, but then there are places like here, for instance, starting in measure 9, where we have like 10 bars or whatever, not 10, 8 bars with no dynamic markings at all. And so that definitely doesn't mean that you do nothing. It just means that you have some artistic license there to decide what you think that you want to do. So like this fortissimo here doesn't mean subito fortissimo, but it can. And then again, we have this fortissimo marked, and then not a lot of, we have, crescendo and diminuendo with not a lot of specifics marked. So it leaves you a lot of options. Does anyone have any questions, observations, anything that they would like to share? or have answered. Well, I was gonna play this if we had time, but we don't. But I'm gonna send in the chat the score to Beethoven's Opus 127 quartet, just as something interesting if you guys want to check it out. The third movement is the Beethoven late quartet version of a scherzo, and you can just see how much further he has taken this genre throughout. So we saw kind of the span of Haydn's career and what he did with this form, this very simple form that has been around forever and still is around today, and how much he developed it. And then Beethoven took it over. We can see already in the Opus 18s that he has really done a lot of new exciting things with it. And then through his career, he further really transformed this form as he really kind of transformed the whole genre. So I encourage everyone to check that out. It's a really awesome piece, and it is like so virtuosic, but still maintains that dance-like quality of the other ones. So it was really great talking to you guys today, and I hope that was interesting and you learned something. If anyone has any questions, I'll stick around, and you can feel free to drop by and say any comments or questions that you have. But if not, have a great rest of your afternoon, and thanks for being here.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
I just wanted to say the scherzo, the Beethoven, like the switching back and forth between feeling it in 3 and 6/8, kind of reminds me of mariachi music. But I thought
Yeah, that's a great observation. That's really interesting. That's true. Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye.